Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. I want to ask you all a question. This is interactive. Please raise your hand, and I will call on you. You have the responsibility of building a sports franchise, and we're doing this in the AI model, meaning it's not real. But you can build any team you want. Baseball, basketball, football, hockey. We'll do the 4 majors. And you get to have the first pick in that particular sports field of any player in time, not just modern time, any player over any time to build your franchise. Who do you pick and why? Who do you pick and why? So this is the interactive part of the service. That's the question. I'd like to hear your answer. We'll start with Arnie Herman. Okay, so Arnie chooses the field of hockey, which is predictable for you, and he chooses Mark Messier from the Rangers, and why? Leadership. Okay, good answer. Steve Lehman.
Baseball, Willie Mays, who was my favorite athlete of all time. He won, he was modest, he was an icon for that generation.
Okay, so Steve says baseball, Willie Mays, because he was an icon of that generation. He could run, he could field, and he was a mensch of that generation. I happen to agree. These are good choices so far. Carol Stoyer, not the hand I expected to see, but I'll take it. Great answer. So Carol, that was a 3-pointer. Carol chose basketball. She said Bill Russell. He's everything you want in an athlete, everything you want in a human being, everything you want in a team leader. We got a couple others. Nate. Why? Okay. Nate, you get a gold star for that answer. It's a beautiful answer. You really do. He said Sandy Koufax, and he said Sandy Koufax because he was the best pitcher to ever pitch, and he's from Brooklyn, and that happens to be Jewish, not a very long list of athletes in that arena. And in addition to all of that, in 1965, he had the temerity to not pitch on the World Series, and that's something we still talk about, more than half a century later. Bruce.
Gil Hodges, because he wasn't only a great ball player, and he was from Brooklyn, but he won the World Series for the Mets in 1969, and in this very day, people speak about his leadership capacity, how he turned his players into young men. And it was regretful that he had a smoking habit, because that killed his world.
Okay, so Bruce chose a Mets player, also predictable. He chose Gil Hodges because of his leadership and his role in winning the 1969 World Series. I see Henry's hand. I can't not pick on Henry today. Okay, great answer. I'm kind of surprised I didn't hear it yet. Henry said baseball, Babe Ruth, because he was the best baseball player to ever play the game. I think there's truth to that. I think there's truth, and that's a great answer. I'm going to take one more, and for all of you who I asked to raise your hand and participate, shame on all of you for not doing so. Great answer. Mariano Rivera, the greatest closer in the history of baseball, the only unanimous pick, first ballot for the Hall of Fame, and also a great, devout, wonderful human being. Great choice. These are all great choices. It's hard to contend with any of these choices that you all made. What I find interesting, and I appreciate that many of you gave answers expecting that, Rabbi Kirshner is asking you the question on Shabbat, so I need to give you a good, thoughtful answer. But if I were not asking on Shabbat, and I was asking you in some survey that was happening on the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Journal or any other ESPN magazine, You probably would give similar answers, and I think that's fair. Maybe not exactly the same, but perhaps the criteria is different. And some of you, like the one who chose Mariano Rivera, you are choosing Mariano Rivera because of what that man offered to baseball in a defensive manner. Defensively, he was unparalleled. I'm a little embarrassed. I'm not such an expert when it comes to hockey, but my understanding is Mark Messier was an offensive genius, right? He was a major scorer. He was incredible. He did a lot of things, but he was one of the major scorers in NHL history, correct? Okay, so you chose Mark because, yes, he's a great leader, but he also had incredible prowess for scoring on the field. And what's interesting is that most of us will go in one particular direction when choosing, whether it's baseball, basketball, hockey, or football. We're going to choose somebody who we think is best based on either their offensive prowess or their defensive prowess. I thought it was interesting. I don't think I got any football from anybody here. Did someone say football? Oh, you said Tom Brady. Okay, that's an interesting one, but a perfect example for what I want to say. Because Tom Brady, okay, he's a team leader and, 2 minutes to go and they're down by 5. He's a guy you want with the ball. But he is an offensive genius, right? What he does is about putting points on the board. So here comes my question. My question to all of you is, when building your team, what is more important? Is it Babe Ruth that's going to swat dozens and dozens of home runs and having offense? Or is it Mariano Rivera who's going to pitch so incredibly geniusly, brilliantly, that no one can hit off of him, and it's going to secure your defense? What matters more when setting the foundation for your team? Offense or defense? I think a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks ago, Bret Stephens gave the State of the Jewish People address at the 92nd Street Y. This has become a really pinnacle event, and it's become much more watched and appreciated ever since October 7th. 3 years ago, it was Barry Weiss who gave the speech. Last year was Dan Senior. This year it was Bret Stephens. And they basically put the thermometer in to the Jewish people, and they give you a read of where we are, and then they do something where they give you their, more than prognosis, they give you their script. They give you their medicine that they think the Jewish people need to continue forward. And Bret said something really interesting, a little provocative. He said, it's time to totally disband and throw away all of the energies and resources, institutions, and organizations that fight anti-Semitism in the world. And he used a phrase that's one of my favorites in saying, to continue to invest in these is a fool's errand. Meaning, in Bret's words, this is never going to stop Jew hatred. It will have ebb and flow, and people will be out to get us all the time. But clearly, in the billions of dollars we have spent in the last decade on it, we've moved the needle in the wrong direction. And we shouldn't waste money anymore. Instead, we should be investing in pro-Semitism. We should be investing to underscore in what Dan Senior had said, in Jewish day school education and making it more accessible and affordable to more Jews. We should be making synagogue affiliation and membership more meaningful and better for all Jews, and there are a lot of systemic parts to that, including making rabbinic education and leadership something that is even stronger and better. And further, we should make Israel accessibility wider and better. It's great that we're sending all of these young people in college who want to go on birthright, but between COVID and October 7th, we stopped almost an entire season, meaning 6 to 7 years worth of kids that would usually go miss that window. So what are they going to do now that they start their professional lives? And what are we doing with adults who have never been? And by the way, that number is astronomical. We need to make more portals to get to Israel, to connect Jews, and make it less expensive. Even our synagogue trips that we do, which of course are fun and lovely and meaningful and done well, they're astronomically expensive. So what Bret Stephens is saying is, let's invest our money in making those trips more accessible. Let's invest our money in saying to people who want to send their kid to day school, This is not going to cost you so much. It's not going to be college tuition for 12 years of their lives. And let's also invest in making the synagogue a place like a JCC that is really a beacon with outstanding programming, with outstanding staff, and a really thoughtful group of people. And let's get rid of groups like the Anti-Defamation League and all that they do. Well, in the audience that night was Jonathan Greenblatt, who was the head of the Anti-Defamation League. And I had a couple of problems with what Bret Stephens said. Mainly, it was how he said it and less what he said. Meaning, he's actually chummy with Jonathan Greenblatt. They share a nice friendship. And I thought blindsiding Jonathan in the audience that way and putting him on the defense, no pun intended, was a little obnoxious, a little sensationalist, and not very graceful. And I think there are ways he could have said the same thing with a little bit more appreciation and grace and not put people like Jonathan and others on their heels. But even so, just to respond to this issue, Jonathan Greenblatt went on Dan Senor's podcast to make a reply, to say, hold on a second, before you're so quick to cut off the Anti-Defamation League and the hundreds of $millions that it raises and puts into the Jewish world every single day, maybe we should take a dipstick into what we do and how we do what we do. And what Jonathan Greenblatt said is, yeah, it's not hard to agree with Bret Stephens. I don't disagree with him in theory. Of course I want to make synagogues and JCCs better and stronger. Of course I want to make day school education more affordable and more accessible. And of course I want more people to go to Israel. Who could be opposed to that? I happen to agree with him. And he even said, Jonathan Greenblatt, that we cannot continue to make anti-Semitism this ongoing disease that's never ending and incurable, that continues to keep the Jewish people afloat. We can't do that. It won't work. It will lose its potency. I agree with Greenblatt on that. But at the same time, Jonathan says to turn away from the realities of the world, to turn off from what is happening on a college campus or in Poway or in Pittsburgh is nothing short of naive. And if we look at what happened in Colleyville, it was the rabbi's response in Colleyville that saved his and the other hostages' lives, and he was trained by the Anti-Defamation League. The Anti-Defamation League, when it's not fighting anti-Semitism, is fighting for human rights for African Americans, for Asian Americans, for LGBTQ, for anyone who would find themselves on the margins that don't want to be there. And Jonathan's argument is, sadly, we live in a world, not just in America, but a world that continues to marginalize the other. And if we just ignore it, we are in essence giving license, giving fuel to those haters and giving them a clear and direct, unobstructed path to continue in their way. So Jonathan said, to do this, to turn off the spigot to the Anti-Defamation League and all the organizations like it, would actually be the fool's errand. That would be the stupidity to think that pro-Semitism could indeed change this topic. That being so pro-Semitist that we would then erase the need of Jewish security and survival. And Greenblatt says, if you want Jews to succeed in this world, then you must offer them security first. If you want Jews to have the best education at a Jewish day school, you got to make sure, sadly, that that Jewish day school is safe. And in this synagogue, it's no different. Do you know that 15% of our budget, and it's only going up, 15% of our budget is spent on security at this synagogue. And there are people who think we're cutting corners on that front, that we need to spend more. Our budget is not insignificant. It's a lot of money. And in the time I've been here, it has increased twofold upon twofold upon twofold with a compounding interest that is unfathomable. But it just continues to grow, and it ain't going anywhere. And it's the same at other synagogues and other day schools and other JCCs. And God forbid we had the porosity that allowed evildoers into our midst, then we couldn't do the amazing work that we do. We couldn't change souls and lives and inspire and offer all of the opportunities that we are engaged in trying to make happen. This idea of Greenblatt versus Stevens and offense versus defense is not new to this congregation. Maybe a dozen years ago or more, I wrote an article about a real-life situation that happened here on Shabbat. And it's one that I think about all the time. I titled the article, Chicken Little and Mr. Bluebird. It was about an incident that happened during Kiddush on a random Shabbat here about a dozen years ago. And what I'm about to tell you, the irony is not lost on me considering what's happening now. About a dozen years ago, I'm at Kiddush, and a gentleman who was a regular at Shabbat came up to me and said, Rabbi, I want you to know that my cousin's uncle's neighbor, who's an attorney, heard from his neighbor who's in the Mossad that Iran will become nuclear on Thursday. This was a dozen years ago. And I turned to him and I said, Phil, I'm so glad that was declassified, and I'm so glad that you chose to share it with me. Thank you. Not a minute and a half later, and not 10 feet away, I turned my back to go to another table and wish people Shabbat Shalom. And a gentleman comes up to me and he says, Rabbi, I want you to know that they lasered in on the gene at the Weizmann Institute that causes breast cancer, and Israel and the Weizmann Institute is going to cure breast cancer for the world. Robert, thank you so much for telling me that. I appreciate it. And there, within 10 feet and 60 seconds of each other, were Chicken Little and Mr. Bluebird. One who's telling me the sky is falling. They're coming to get us. You're gonna die because you're a Jew. And the other one who's coming and telling me, 10 feet away from each other, enjoying the same tuna fish on a bagel. Rabbi, the Jews, again, are gonna save the world. We're gonna save the world. And you need to feel proud that we're gonna bring this to the world. It's like the Purim story all over again. Haman comes forward and says to Achashverosh, hey, there's this group called the Jews and we need to get rid of them. And then Mordecai activates Esther and says, no, we're gonna fight back and we're gonna win. So who has more potency, Haman or Mordecai? Greenblatt or Stevens? Chicken Little or Mr. Bluebird? What matters more for our Jewish world? Parshat Zachor has one of the greatest oxymorons in all of Judaism. It says, Timche et zecher Amalek. Erase the memory of the Amalekites and never forget. Well, can anyone tell me how we're supposed to erase the memory of something and then never forget it? What is the purpose of erasing a memory that you never forget? The whole purpose is to never forget, but you don't want to be reminded of it. I mean, we would never tell our kids, I want you to forget the Nazis. I want you to forget ISIS. I want you to forget Hamas. Forget Hezbollah. We're teaching just the opposite. Never forget what the Nazis tried to do to us. Never forget what ISIS tried to do for us. Never forget the evil of Hamas or Hezbollah and their ultimate desires. But what the Torah, I think, was trying to say, in perhaps an inarticulate way, was that we really need to hold both these truths at the same time. That we have to do everything in our power to eradicate those evildoers and to not make their name part of our language, while at the same time never forgetting those who sought to do evil to us. I think what our world needs better, and what I wish Brett Stevens and perhaps even Jonathan Greenblatt would have said from that bima at the 92nd Street Y, is that yes, we need much more pro-Semitism. I agree with every syllable of Brett Stevens. We need to make trips to Israel more accessible, and not just for college kids. We need to make day school more affordable, and we need to get more people into day schools, and we need to make synagogues excellent. Not good, excellent. And the people running them excellent. So that synagogues around the country can be the beacon of excellence that we would have in any other organizational place. Not mediocre, excellent. And that is pro-Semitism. And on that, I applaud Brett Stevens. But at the same exact time, we cannot for a minute let our guard down. We cannot for a minute forsake the realities of the world we live in and those that seek to do harm to us. And we must, with all of our might, hold up that other side of things that puts us in a protective measure without negating the need for moving forward. Something that erases the memory of the Nazis without ever forgetting what they did. Something that holds both of those with equal weight and equal balance, and not all or nothing of one or the other. Because to be all or nothing of one or the other is the real fool's errand. You pick any quarterback at any time who has a 125 quarterback rating and can put in 3 touchdowns on average in scoring to build your team, and I will tell you that quarterback only wins if they have a defense that stops the team they're playing against from scoring more points. You provide me any pitcher in Major League Baseball who has an ERA of 1.0. You show me that pitcher and I'll tell you that team only wins when their team, that pitcher's team, is able to get enough runs to allow them to score more. Defense only works with a substantive offense, and offense only works with a substantive defense. You can't have only one of any particular side to succeed. And the Jewish world we live in today requires that nuance. It needs Chicken Little and it needs Mr. Bluebird, but they gotta sit at the same table for Kiddush. They can't be 10 feet away and 10 miles away and 1,000 miles apart on their worldviews. They have to be in conversation with each other, in appreciation of each other, and understanding of each other. They have to realize the significance of a smart offense and a thoughtful defense that will help our religion continue to win in the game that we are facing today and for the games of tomorrow. Shabbat shalom, everybody.